The standard financial advice says by 40, you should have 3 times your annual salary saved for retirement. Fidelity published this benchmark. Financial advisors recite it in consultations. They're billing you $300 an hour for. Somewhere on your LinkedIn feed this morning, a person your exact age announced they crossed that threshold with a caption about discipline and 5 a.m. wake-up calls and being intentional with their choices. Here's what nobody puts in the same breath as that number. It was reverse engineered from a person who started contributing to a 401k at 22, captured every single employer match, never had a meaningful employment gap, never carried high interest consumer debt, and happened to live somewhere rent didn't consume 40% of their take home. That person exists. They are not statistically most of the people watching this. And the specific, expensive mistake I want to prevent you from making is spending the next decade chasing a benchmark calibrated for a life you didn't live, using a strategy designed for someone who was never behind. Because that strategy doesn't just fail to help you catch up, it actively points you toward the wrong destination. You'll be flying hard, making what feel like all the right moves, quietly heading north over the Norwegian Sea, while everyone told you this was the route to London. So here's the question nobody is asking loudly enough. If the benchmark was always wrong for your actual life, what is the right target? And how do you get there from where you actually are right now? By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. They assume you started at 22 with 0 career interruptions. Mine uses BlackRock and Vanguard projection logic to expose the actual weak points in your specific plan. And I only ask for your email to send the report, so I don't store any of your financial data. Link is in the description. Here is the metaphor I'm going to return to throughout this entire video, and I need you to hold it because I'll use it as both explanation and occasionally punchline. When an airline pilot files a flight plan, there's a concept in navigation called course deviation. If a plane departing New York for London is off by just 1 degree at takeoff, 1 degree, not 10, not 30, 1, by the time it crosses the Atlantic, it is not in London. It's hundreds of miles north over the Norwegian Sea. Passengers looking out the window at dark water, wondering what happened to England. 1 degree. Nobody notices it on the runway. It doesn't feel like anything at departure. It compounds silently across distance, and you land somewhere completely unintended with no clean explanation for how. Financial decisions work identically. The car payment that seemed manageable at 28, the retirement account you were going to open but kept deferring because you'd get to it, the raises you didn't negotiate because the timing never felt exactly right. None of those felt like disasters. They felt like Tuesday. But they were 1 degree off course. They've been compounding across years. And now you're looking out the window wondering why it doesn't look like England. Every section of this video is about finding exactly where your flight plan deviated and, more importantly, how to recalculate the route from wherever you actually are right now. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a specific 6-figure tax liability sitting inside most 40-year-olds' retirement accounts, one that doesn't appear on any statement and won't feel expensive until it's 20 years too late to address cheaply. But first, here's why the savings rate advice that dominates personal finance content is even more broken than the benchmarks themselves. 15%. Save 15% of your income for retirement. That is the rule. It's in every personal finance book your financially minded friends have recommended. Your company's 401k enrollment packet probably echoes it. And it's not technically wrong. It's incomplete in a way that makes it useless and sometimes actively harmful for a large portion of the people receiving it. Because it carries invisible assumptions, nobody states clearly. Assumptions that only hold for one specific type of person, and that person might not be you. Run the actual numbers. You are 40 years old, earning $65,000 per year with $35,000 in retirement savings. This is near the median situation for Americans in their late 30s and early 40s, according to Vanguard's 2024 How America Saves report. You save 15% going forward. That's $9,750 per year. At 7% average annual return over 25 years, you accumulate approximately $640,000 at a 4% withdrawal rate. The conservative benchmark most retirement planners use that generates $25,600 per year from your portfolio adds Social Security at full retirement age. Roughly $22,000 annually on a typical earnings history. You're at $47,600 per year in retirement income in today's dollars. That is below the current median household income in the United States. That is survivable. It is not the financial independence most people are picturing when they think about what they're working toward. And every year, that gap between what standard advice produces and what you actually want goes unaddressed. The cost to close it gets larger. Now, here's the part that personal finance content almost always skips because it's less actionable and more honest. The reason most people end up behind isn't primarily mathematical, it's behavioral. The decisions that created the situation were made under conditions that weren't designed for long-term optimization. Research from Princeton and Harvard, published in the journal Science in 2013, showed that people operating under conditions of financial scarcity demonstrated cognitive performance equivalent to functioning on 13 fewer IQ points than their baseline. Not because they were less capable, because mental bandwidth was occupied. The person who couldn't save consistently in their 20s or early 30s wasn't lazy. They were processing, and processing under scarcity doesn't leave a lot of capacity for compound interest calculations and 30-year projections. Understanding this matters because it removes the shame from the diagnosis and replaces it with a systems problem. Systems problems have systems solutions. That's what the rest of this video is about. Here is the reversal. Most financial content never makes clearly. You think the problem is your savings rate. The actual problem is that your income isn't high enough for any standard savings rate to produce the retirement you're imagining. Those are different diagnoses. They require different treatments. Cutting expenses has a floor. You can reduce your cost of living so far and no further before you're making the present genuinely miserable in ways that aren't sustainable long term. Canceling streaming services saves roughly $300 per year. Meaningful expense reduction on housing and transportation matters, and I'll come back to it, but it has a mathematical ceiling. Your income has no ceiling. And the specific, uncomfortable truth about income after 40 is that most people accept whatever their current employer is willing to pay, which is determined by what it costs to keep them there, not by what those skills actually command in the current market. That gap, invisible on every paycheck, can be 11 to 20% or more. That is money leaving your household every year in the form of a salary that was never paid. There's a story I came across years ago that I keep returning to. A mid-sized pharmaceutical company in the late 90s had a retention problem. People were leaving at a rate that was costing real money in recruiting and onboarding. Leadership assumed it was culture, workload, or limited advancement. They brought in a compensation consultant who benchmarked against the external labor market. What she found was both completely obvious in retrospect and invisible to everyone living inside it. The company's internal raise structure, 3% annually, slightly less in difficult years, had accumulated a compounding gap over a decade. Employees who joined at competitive market rates in 1989 were, by 1999, earning 11 to 17% below what the open market would pay for identical experience and skills. They had been loyal. The company had given them consistent annual increases. No one had noticed that the market moved faster than the internal structure, quietly widening a gap neither side was explicitly tracking. The employees who eventually left discovered their market value was dramatically higher than what they'd been paid for years. Not because the employer was extractive, because information asymmetry is silently expensive and it compounds. This story is from the 90s because that's when the case study was written. The exact same dynamic is running in your organization right now. ADP's payroll analytics data for recent years confirms this with specificity. People who changed jobs saw median pay increases above 9% from the transition alone. People who stayed at the same employer saw 4 to 5% annually, compounded over a decade on a base salary of $80,000. That trajectory difference represents somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 in cumulative earnings. That is not a rounding error. That is your Roth IRA, funded for close to 20 years. The cost of loyalty is measurable. It does not appear on any statement your employer sends you. Here is something almost nobody says clearly about income growth in your 40s. The highest leverage moment to push for a significant salary increase is not when you're desperate and accepting anything available, and not when you're comfortable enough that you've stopped thinking about it. It's right after you've stabilized your financial foundation, emergency buffer in place, high interest debt cleared, automated contributions running. At that point, you can negotiate from strength rather than necessity. You can decline a bad offer and wait for the right one. The financial cushion doesn't eliminate the risk of a career move. It converts the risk from catastrophic to manageable. Manageable risk is what creates real opportunity. By the way, hit subscribe if you're finding this useful. The YouTube algorithm is genuinely strange. And if you don't subscribe, there's a real possibility the recommendation system never surfaces this channel to you again, even if you wanted it to. I know every creator says this. The mechanics actually support it. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. And it's the part of this conversation that most financial content avoids because it doesn't fit in a short post and requires thinking about a time horizon that feels uncomfortably far away. Most people at 40 have their retirement savings structured in a way that is quietly building a six-figure tax liability they don't know exists. It doesn't appear on any statement. It won't feel like a problem today. It will feel like a very expensive problem 20-something years from now, when they start needing the money and discover a tax bill attached to every single withdrawal. Here's a parable. Two colleagues, David and Sarah, same company, same starting salary, same 401k match, started their careers the same year. David is meticulous. He reads everything, maxes his traditional pre-tax 401k every year without exception, takes every cent of the employer match, and is genuinely proud of the balance he's grown over 2 decades. By 2025, David's account shows an impressive number. Here's what David hasn't fully reckoned with. Every single dollar in that account will be taxed as ordinary income when he withdraws it in retirement. Every distribution, every year, taxed at whatever rate Congress decides the brackets look like when he needs the money. He has no hedge against future tax policy. He has placed a very large, entirely unintentional bet on stable or declining tax rates across 30 years of retirement. Sarah does things slightly differently. She contributes enough to her traditional 401k to capture the full employer match. She's not leaving free money behind. But then she maxes a Roth IRA every year on top of that. She pays taxes on those Roth dollars up front. Her total visible balance looks smaller than David's, but her Roth withdrawals in retirement are completely, permanently, irreversibly tax-free. Every dollar of 30 years of compounding untaxed over a 30-year retirement on a $500,000 Roth balance, the difference in total tax exposure between David's situation and Sarah's could be $150,000 to $200,000, depending on what happens to brackets. And Congress revised the tax code in 2001, in 2017, and in 2022, assuming stable rates across a 30-year retirement isn't a plan. It's an assumption dressed up as one. Sarah didn't earn more than David, didn't save more, didn't take more market risk. She aimed the flight plan 1 degree differently at takeoff. Recalculate the route. If you're catching up at 40, tax diversification, meaningful balances in both traditional pre-tax accounts and Roth after-tax accounts is one of the highest leverage structural decisions available to you right now. You're not trying to predict the future. You're removing a variable you have no ability to control from your retirement math. That hedge is worth real money, and the window to establish it efficiently is still open. And before someone brings up the financial influencer who eliminated $300,000 in debt in 18 months by extreme budgeting and a complete life restructuring, that person is genuinely impressive and also not the median situation most people are working from. I just want to acknowledge that out loud. But here's what nobody actually tells you about the catch-up. The sequence matters more than the individual amounts. And most people who attempt it get the sequence badly wrong. Let me introduce you to Marcus, because I'm going to come back to him. Marcus is 42 years old. He earns $85,000 per year at a regional company he's been with for 9 years. He has $63,000 in his 401k. He owns a home with approximately $200,000 in equity. No significant high-interest consumer debt. On paper, Marcus looks like he is doing okay. He tells himself he is doing okay. He does not feel financial urgency. And this inertia inside numbers that look acceptable is Marcus's most expensive problem, not the balance sheet. The absence of urgency produced by a situation that doesn't hurt. His 401k contribution has been 6% since year one, capturing the 3% employer match, and the optimization stopped there. He has been meaning to open a Roth IRA since 2021. He has had the browser tab open twice, and Marcus keeps waiting for the inflection point, the year where the raise is bigger, where momentum arrives automatically. That year has not come. His wealth trajectory is flat. Not because of something he did wrong, because the inertia of okay is one of the most effective wealth-building stoppers that exists, and unlike a crisis, it never hurts enough in the present to force movement. I'm going to come back to Marcus. The psychology here matters more than most financial content acknowledges. Behavioral economists have a name for what's happening to Marcus: status quo bias. The tendency to prefer the current state not because it's optimal, but because changing it requires effort, and the cost of inaction is invisible today. When you do nothing, it doesn't register as doing something negative. It registers as neutral. In compounding financial terms, neutral is a loss. Every month, Marcus doesn't increase his savings rate, is a month of compounding. He forfeits at the exact moment in his life when compounding is operating over its most powerful remaining time horizon. He's not failing, he's just not winning. Over long enough periods, those produce identical destinations. In the early 2000s, economists Brigitte Madrian and Dennis Shea studied 401k participation rates at a large manufacturing company before and after switching from opt-in to opt-out enrollment. Before the switch, fewer than 50% of eligible employees participated. After, close to 90%. Same employees, same match, same plan, same information about the benefits. The only variable that changed was the default behavior. When participation required an active decision, half of them never made it. When inaction meant enrollment, almost all of them ended up enrolled. The architecture of the decision determined the outcome, not the quality of the decision makers. This is why automation is not a convenience feature in financial planning. It is structurally superior to willpower as a savings mechanism. The best financial behavior is the behavior that happens automatically when you do nothing. Set the default correctly once, then step back and let it run. Now, let me give this real numbers through someone I'll call James. He is 41 years old. He earns $80,000 per year in a mid-sized American city with a moderate cost of living. He has $42,000 in a 401k from a job he left 4 years ago. Sitting in a default target date fund he selected during a rushed onboarding session and has not looked at since. He has $16,000 in a savings account. He carries $13,200 in credit card debt across 3 cards at an average interest rate of 19.3%. His car payment is $640 per month on a vehicle he bought new 3 years ago. He owns no real estate. James is paying approximately $2,550 per year in credit card interest. Not investing it, not growing it, not getting anything back, just paying it to someone else's compounding. His car payment is $7,680 per year, flowing out of his household into a depreciating asset. Together, those two items consume over $10,000 annually of potential wealth building capacity. Because they're automatic monthly debits, they feel like fixed conditions of life rather than decisions he made. They're decisions, and decisions can change. Here's the catch-up sequence for James, organized in 3 levels. The order is the strategy, not the amounts. Level 1, stop the bleeding. James takes $12,000 from his savings account and eliminates his 2 highest rate credit cards immediately. He keeps $4,000 as a 1-month emergency firewall liquid in a separate account he treats as untouchable. The firewall matters because the number one reason people repeat the credit card cycle while trying to pay it off is an unexpected expense. With no buffer, the car breaks down, the medical bill arrives, back on the card it goes. $4,000 stops that pattern. His free cash flow from the eliminated minimum payments is over $300 per month immediately. His remaining balance on the third card, approximately $1,300 at the lowest rate, is gone within 4 months using that freed cash. The $2,550 per year in interest payments stops. That money is no longer leaving his household to produce nothing. Level 2, build the engine. James calls his old employer's 401k provider and initiates a direct rollover into a traditional IRA at a low-cost brokerage. No tax event, no penalty, a clean transfer. His $42,000 moves from a default target date fund carrying a 0.6% annual expense ratio to a total market index fund at 0.03%. The expense ratio difference of 0.57% annually, compounded on $42,000 over 20 years at market returns, recovers approximately $18,000 in compounding. $18,000 from a phone call and a form. 1 degree of correction. He then opens a Roth IRA. James also sells his car. I know how that sounds, but run the number honestly. He gets $9,000 on a private sale. He buys a reliable 5-year-old sedan for $10,800, paying $1,800 out of his remaining savings. His monthly payment drops from $640 to $0. $7,680 per year previously funding depreciation is now available to redirect. He routes $583 per month into the Roth IRA. At 7% average annual return over 24 years, those Roth contributions alone compound to approximately $365,000. $365,000 from a car decision. Recalculate the route. Level 3, scale the input. James researches compensation for his role and experience level in the current market. He does 3 conversations with other companies over 6 weeks, not because he's desperate, but because he needs accurate information about what his skills are actually worth externally. He receives an offer at $93,000. He counteroffers. He lands at $95,000. The week before the first paycheck at the new rate, he increases his 401k contribution at the new employer to 12%, capturing the full employer match, and confirms the Roth IRA automatic transfer is running. The checking account never experiences the raise as discretionary money. Lifestyle creep shows up and finds the door locked. Project the compounding from that position. James at 41, contributing approximately $21,000 per year across accounts at 7% average annual return over 25 years, starting from $42,000. Total invested assets at 66 approach $1.15 million. Social Security at full retirement age on his updated earnings history, approximately $27,000 per year. 4% withdrawal from the portfolio. $46,000 annually. Total annual retirement income in today's purchasing power. Approximately $73,000 from someone paying credit card interest and an unnecessary car loan at 41. 1 degree of correction, compounded across distance, completely different airport. And yes, someone in the comments is typing right now. Tom, what about REITs? What about dividend investing? What about S&P 500 versus international allocation? Yes, all genuinely interesting conversations worth having. After levels 1, 2, and 3 in that sequence, the most sophisticated portfolio construction in the world underperforms a mediocre one when you're simultaneously paying 19.3% interest to a credit card company. Eliminate the guaranteed loss before you optimize the potential gain. Stay with me, because this next part is what actually separates people who understand a catch-up plan from people who execute one. Back to Marcus. He has been sitting in inertia since I introduced him, and here is where his story resolves. Marcus does not need to sell the house, change careers, launch a side hustle, or move to a lower cost of living city. He needs to log into his 401k portal and change his contribution from 6% to 15%. That is the entire action. On his income, after accounting for the pre-tax reduction in his taxable income, his monthly take-home decreases by approximately $560. Real. It stings for a few months. Then it becomes the new normal, because the brain adapts to available income faster than most people expect. his retirement projection on the current 6% path versus 15% over 23 remaining working years. Approximately $475,000 versus approximately $980,000 in accumulated assets, close to double from changing one number in a web portal. Marcus's problem was never that he lacked information. It was that the inertia of okay never hurt badly enough to generate movement. The financial equivalent of a check engine light that doesn't illuminate until the engine is already gone, that is the kicker of every story like Marcus's. Not catastrophe, comfort held too long. Here are 3 practical moves, calibrated specifically to this situation and not generic advice wearing a suit. First, calculate your exact net worth today with real numbers. Assets minus liabilities written down with specific figures in a document you can update. Not a feeling, not an estimate. Not probably around. The precise number today. This takes 45 minutes if you've never done it. Most people navigating their financial lives are doing so by an approximation. They've never tested against reality. And that approximation is almost always wrong in at least one significant way. Knowing your actual number, especially if it's lower than you'd hoped, is the beginning of actually being in control. And there's something else that happens when you see the real number clearly. The low-grade financial anxiety that lives in ambiguity begins to sharpen into something actionable. Vagueness is not comfort. It's unprocessed stress that sits in the background and consumes bandwidth without producing useful information. The real number, however uncomfortable, gives you something to navigate from. You cannot recalculate a route you haven't accurately plotted. Second, automate the gap between your income and your savings target before lifestyle creep finds it. Every raise, every bonus, every incremental income increase should have a corresponding automatic transfer already configured before the first paycheck arrives at the new level. The money should never reach your checking account in a way your brain registers as available to spend. This is not about discipline or willpower. It's about removing the monthly decision from the equation entirely. The research on default behavior is unambiguous. Opt-out systems produce dramatically better financial outcomes than opt-in systems. Not because the participants are different people, but because the architecture of the choice determines the behavior. Set the default to the right behavior once, then do not override it the next time something shinier arrives in your feed. Third, understand your market value and test it. Your income is the numerator in your entire financial life, not your savings rate, not your asset allocation, not your fund selection. The income. Increase the numerator, and everything downstream shifts. Research what your experience level and skill set actually command in the current market. Do one informational interview. Submit one application to understand what the market says you're worth right now. Have one conversation with a recruiter in your field. Not necessarily because you're leaving, because knowing your options is the foundation of negotiating from strength instead of fear. And one well-timed salary negotiation, executed from a position of financial stability rather than desperation, can recover more value than 5 years of optimized expense reduction. You are in your peak earning years right now. The lever is there. Most people fly right past it. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The people who end up financially stable at 60 aren't, in most cases, the ones who found the most sophisticated strategy, or timed something correctly, or discovered a vehicle the rest of the market hadn't priced. They're the ones who found the right direction and refused to deviate from it, boring month after boring month, when nothing felt like momentum, when the balance grew slowly, when nobody was paying attention. Many of them started late. Many of them were behind at 40 in ways that looked worse on paper than yours. They made it anyway. Not because the math was easy or the timing was perfect, because they recalculated the route and kept flying 1 degree, held consistently, compounded across distance. The clock is running. You know what to do.